Hello and welcome back to Rev Endurance Sports and another edition of event recaps. This is also part of a series of my road to PBP, and that is a 1,200 kilometer or 750 mile unsupported event held in Paris called Brest Paris, PBP for short. And you have to do these qualifying events of 200K, 300K, 400K, which this event recap is about, and a 600K. And I'll get into the imperial distances later. But, the first thing to say is I call it an event recap because it's not really a race. We race them just because we want to get them done fast. But primarily, at least for me, I race against myself and my old personal best, personal records. And so to that end, this 400K is a 3-hour PR from a previous effort, 3 hours and like 40 minutes or so. So very good effort, or 3 hours, 20 minutes, something like that. That's a very good chunk of time cut off. So, but before we get into the actual event recap, a couple of admin notes. If you see anything that I talk about on this channel that I personally use or review, if you'd like to support the channel, please hit me up because anything that I'm basically reviewing on this channel is for sale. And, it's a good way to support the channel because the YouTube ad revenue, I've been monetized for coming up on a year, or maybe yesterday was a year, March 21st. And, it hasn't even made $2,000 yet. And I've got over 600 videos on YouTube. So that's not a way to earn a living. The shop is what does it for me. Earning a living is through my in-store sales. So let's get into the the other admin note is I still need to do chapters, but please be kind. If the video is a little long, you knew before you clicked on. There's no need for any hate. I like to develop a story and tell you, and then also there's there's some offshoots every now and then, and those are golden nuggets that from my previous experience can help you in your endurance riding. All right, so before getting on to the actual event recap, we always need to be thanking our volunteers. So if it's a supported event and they got aid stations, if it's an unsupported event like this one, the volunteers come from within. They are people who ride just like you. They've sacrificed a day to man a control or to like the RBA, the Regional Brevet Administrator, to create these routes and take care of the administrative stuff of sending your finishing results here and there and doing all that stuff. So always thank your volunteers. So Wei Sun, thank you. Patrick Sullivan was at the turnaround point. Wei Sun is the RBA. Patrick Sullivan was at the turnaround point in Corona, like mile 122 or so. Wei Sun also manned the control at mile 40. So, you have to thank these folks. They allow you to ride your bike. All right, let's talk about we're going to talk about results, prep, clothing, nutrition, the bike itself. I think I might have said that. And then what worked and what didn't work. So let's get into this thing first with the results. So 28 riders by my count. There were 3 DNFs, 2 did not starts. And then there were some folks that also did the workers' ride. So you do the workers' ride and then you're available to volunteer on the day of the event. So thank you folks for doing that again. So this is, as I break down the results, it's basically, hour 16 means from 16 to 16:59. Hour 17 means from hour 17 to 17:59. All right, so in the hour block of 16, there were 5 folks. 4 of them were on today's, on the ride with me. So it was Barbara, Lori, Brooke, and myself was 4, and then Patrick Sullivan was the other gentleman. So that makes 5 in the 16-hour block. No one finished in the 17-hour block, 18-hour block 2, 19-hour 4, 20-hour 1, 21-hour 3. No one at 22 hours. By the way, the 21-hour folks, 21:57, so really close to 22 hours. No one at 22 hours. One person at 23, and they were 23:58, so they were coming in at 4:58 a.m. because the ride started at 5 a.m. 3 at 24 plus hours, and then 4 at 25 plus. Now here's the thing. You watch bike races, cameras are always focusing on, the lead riders, the breakaway, all that stuff. These folks that came in 23, 24, 25 hours, I mean, you got to give them a lot of respect and make sure that you reach out if you're on Strava with them. Give them a kudos because, I mean, it takes a lot of tenacity to ride 20 plus hours and get it done. So the time limit is 27 hours, and some of these folks, 4 of them were coming in at 25 plus hours. I wonder if at some point the alarm bells started going off and it's like, wow, we got to hurry up and get to the finish. All right, so bike prep, there is a video. I'll link that down below. There was a lot of conversation. I did a bottle video, I did a bike prep video, and then I did a follow-up video to the bottle choices. I appreciate everyone's suggestion. I may get snarky and snippy, and I'm just trying to pull people's legs and get conversation going. But I'm I know what I want. I know what I need. I've been doing endurance events for a very long time. So don't be offended if I say, that just doesn't work for me. And the bottles was one thing. I had 2 bottles, 38-ounce bottles. They're perfect for me, for my uses. I have a frame pump. I don't like mini pumps unless I have to use a mini pump, like on my Bianchi. You can't put a frame pump there. But I had no space issues. I had no limitations. 38-ounce bottles, front and back, with the frame pump. Everything's perfect. The 2 bottles allows me a lot of flexibility. So the crank tank and these frame bladders, and I don't like that kind of stuff for my road bikes. Maybe for my gravel bike if I ever decide to do something like that. But the 2 bottles, lots of flexibility. One can have fuel, one has water, one has electrolytes, one has carb fuel, one has a complete fuel, one has, I don't know, a Coke, right? So you just can do whatever you want with 2 bottles. You go into any store, fill them up, come back out. You go to any, 7-Eleven, Circle K stores, whatever you have in your area, and you just fill them up and you come back out and you're gone. Towards the end of the event, I was sharing my bottles with some of the other riders because they were out. You can't do that on the roll with a crank tank. You can't extend the hose. You can't do that with a Camelback. So I don't ride Camelbacks. I mentioned to a few other folks, I just will not wear a Camelback. It's just not necessary. I did wear one for Trans-Iowa, a 320-mile gravel unsupported event. So I did wear it then, so 500-kilometer plus event. But I just generally don't. Okay, so next thing. That is the results that I mentioned. The route was 250 miles. It was urban on the front end and back end because it was an out and back. It's not a place I would have created a route and done that, but that is the route. It's prescribed. You do the route. Some of the things I was not happy about was, riding through downtown on a Saturday night. We were coming through fairly early, but some of the other folks are coming through 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, midnight I'm talking about. So you're looking at coming through downtown at a very busy time, you know, people are drinking and driving and texting and doing whatever. And then you're going through these shipyards. You come through downtown probably 15, 20 miles from the finish. So at 250 miles, it means you're 230 miles in. And then you're going through some bike paths that are dark. They're safe because there's no cars, but they're dark. And you have to be on your P's and Q's with stuff on the ground and everything. And we'll talk more about pacing and riding these unsupported events. So yes, we started like 2 miles from the Mexican border. So, you know, that's kind of a cool story too. If you're on the northern end of the route and you're all the way up in Corona, 130 miles from the border, and, you know, so, oh, wow, you know, you see the burrito bags or they see you pretty loaded up with stuff. They're like, oh, where are you guys going? Oh, Mexico, you know, because we were like a mile from the border. But so things that I wasn't so pleased about. So urban, shipyards, naval base, downtown. You know, eventually you got out of town, headwinds heading north, heading south. You should have a southwest pushing wind. So, but usually tailwinds, and then you're back through downtown, as I mentioned, and these bike paths. All right, so let's talk about the ride. So the bike equipment. Now, I have fielded other questions in the past. You know, how come you're not riding your Ritchie? You're riding your Bianchi. You know, why? You know, so in this case, it just made sense to ride my Ritchie. Now, a lot of endurance, or a lot of these Brevet people ride steel bikes, panniers, racks, and stuff. And it's nice to see how everyone has got their bike set up. So if you're a geek, this is like the place to be, at the start line of one of these, and see who's got the dyno hub, who had, you know, which is a light that's continuously running as long as you're rolling. It has a little capacitor when you stop at a light, but generally speaking, you know, it's for when you're rolling. All kinds of setups, and it's really cool to see. And also realize that a lot of folks will bring the stuff that they plan on using at the 600K, 375 mile, or the 1200K in Paris. Or some people just do like 1000K as their goal event for the year. Okay, head wheels, the 46 black series wheels with the textured brake track. Great, no wind issues to speak of for the day. 30 mil tubeless tires, which of course on the back end going through those shipyard areas and downtown just really tore up roads, and you have to be super careful. And if you're running a 25 or a narrow tire like a 23, you're going to get caught in some of those grooves. The 30 tire will kind of allow you a little bit more stability, and you're tired and you're sleepy maybe, right? Okay, no aero bars. So some folks have mentioned, how come I'm not using aero bars for an alternate position, or I do this for blah, blah, blah. Yeah, you can't use aero bars in PBP. I may be wrong about that, but for many years you just can't use aero bars in PBP. So you just get used to riding your road bike without aero bars. Okay. So what do you do since you don't have an alternate position? Here's what I do. When it's safe, as I'm coming up to a stoplight or stop sign or something, I stretch. I roll my shoulders a little bit, you know, I kind of roll my neck. I do a little windmill action with my arms, and it's all preventative. You're being proactive before you start to stiffen up. For some of these folks, as I mentioned, 20 plus hours they were on the bike. If you're like this for 20 plus hours, you're going to get stiff. So just try to stretch as often as possible. I can ride with no hands for long distances, do anything I need to do. So that's another opportunity. I sit up, stretch my back. Also when I'm climbing, I stand up, 10 pedal strokes, sit back down. All right. The SQ Lab saddle was perfect for me. It works for me. It works for other riders. I had a bike fit yesterday, put a customer on an SQ Lab saddle, and he was like, wow, this is way better than what I had. Not 100%, he's not 100% convinced yet, but let's give it some time. Let's kind of work it, make sure everything is set the way it's supposed to be. But it was markedly better than what he came in to the shop with. Okay, the burrito bag. Well, before I cover the burrito bag, so no flats. I know that sounds like such a big, like it shouldn't be a big deal, but it's been an issue on some of these other events. Now, I didn't flat on a 200K, which was all raining and everything else, but I flatted out in the desert at the Borrego Springs 300K, and other folks flatted too. Lots of flats, by the way. So no flats on this one. So there you go. All these events, I'm putting brand new tires on, and I know some folks might be promoting a puncture-resistant tire, but I just don't like puncture-resistant tires. They don't ride very well. And if you're going to be in the lead pack with us, I hardly ever see anyone with puncture-resistant tires. Like a gator skin, hard shell, that kind of stuff. All right, the burrito bag. The strategy was that was my storage container, and then I would just move stuff as I needed from that storage container into my back pockets when I would make a stop. Now, keep in mind, I don't like to stop much, which is another reason why I'm using the 38 ounce bottles. That way, I don't have to stop for, I can go past controls, I can go past many stores and keep rolling. So I guess it's a good time to talk about my Brevet riding strategy, unsupported event riding strategy. The common knowledge, or the common philosophy would be, pace yourself. You don't, you want to make sure you have enough for the finish and all this. Yes, fantastic. And if that works for you, please keep doing that, because that works for you. But here's what works for me. I ride as fast and as hard as I can for as long as I can, and stop as little as possible, if at all, during daylight hours. So we started at 5 a.m. So the weather's nice and cool, 45 degrees out. Sunrise was at 6:55, so it was about 2 hours. And we didn't stop for the first 111 miles to get services. So again, another one of my no-no situations where people ask, why do you do no-no rides? Why do you? Because this is why. Get on a bike, keep the wheels rolling as long as possible, because then you've made so much hay during the day that you don't have to ride that much at night. We were coming in at 9. We came in at 9:41, and so 9:41 was 2 hours and 41 minutes after sunset. So we only had to ride in the dark, the 2 hours that everyone had to do in the morning, but in the afternoon or in the evening, it was only 2:41 in the evening riding, because when you're riding at night, you have to go much slower. Your pace slows down. You can't see as well. You have to be very, very careful looking at the pavement for debris and things. You don't want to flat at night. Oh, geez, how long is that going to take to replace a flat? You don't want to crash, because you can't finish if you're on the side of the road or in an ambulance going to a hospital. So you have to slow down. So now you're riding much slower than you could have been riding in the daytime to accumulate these miles. Now, I was astounded to see people stopping to eat in broad daylight, like fewer than 100 miles into this thing. I that's not me. So I've got tons of nutrition on me. I don't need to stop for a slice of pizza. It's just not, I love pizza, by the way, and I'd love to eat it at the finish line, but I'm not going to eat it in the middle of the day when I'm not even 100 miles into a 250 miler. So just a different strategy. You have to do you. You know what your pacing is like. You know what your nutrition needs are. But I know what my nutrition needs are. All right, so let's get into clothing. The Pearl Izumi bib shorts, the Pro Levitate chamois, I'm just in love with them. They work really well. So 250 miles, 16 hours, 41 minutes. I didn't reapply any chamois cream, and normally I would have. So another thumbs up. Now, this is a long-term review on these bib shorts. Again, these are items you can purchase from me and support the channel, support my brick and mortar location. I'm a one-man shop. This is the only thing I do for a living. Chamois cream didn't reapply, but I did have packets. I brought packets with me. They were in my burrito bag. So all these types of planning and supply things, make notes. Base layer, I almost always wear a wool base layer this time of year, fall, winter, spring, right? So 100% merino wool base layers, thin, long sleeve, and then my jersey was a long sleeve jersey. Pearl Izumi calls it Screaming Yellow. Kind of matched my reflective vest. Everything was fine. I had plenty of warmth all day. I was a little bit chilly in the morning starting out. A couple of canyons we dropped in through. And then at night it started to cool off as we were running along the water's edge. But I also had my Gore-Tex jacket, my shake dry, that I would have had as a layer or a wind block, or even if it rained. It wasn't announced, but God, we've had so much rain here. But yeah, so luckily we had a nice weather day, by the way. All right, I wore knee sun sleeves. I didn't wear actual knee warmers because I didn't want to have to take them on and off during the ride. The other gentleman that was riding with us, he had to do that, work with his clothing and take off his long sleeve jersey and then do this and then the knee warmers. But the guy's just ridiculously fast. He's a beast on the bike and he can do that. Zoom up the hill, start getting dressed or undressed, and then as we come by the hill, reconnect with him. I mean, that's just, so we were thankful to have Brooke with us. But I like to keep these things simple. Take all the food I need, and then all the clothing, it just stays on. I don't take things on and off this time of year. In the summer months, that's going to be a different situation. All right. My shoes, I wore my Lake lace-ups. Lace-ups are super comfortable. Retro Grouch here. All these boas and all this stuff. This is much more comfortable. You have many more points where the shoe can articulate to provide comfort and security for your foot. So that's what I wore. More on that later. And also from the Lake Race Last is 5 millimeters extra space. So on a 45 shoe that I wear, 99 is the width, 99 millimeters. I get 104 on the CX1, and so carbon. And to me, why not take the extra 5 mil? So there you go. Abus Game Changer helmet, reflective stuff all over. Sunglasses, I've been thinking about this. Now, I've got some photochromatic glasses, and one thing to consider is that your glasses, your sunglasses, whatever you're going to use for the nighttime, that's eye protection, and you may not just look at it as, okay, I have sunglasses. I'll wear those during the day, and then at night I'll just take them off, which is what I did this time. But I also wasn't expecting to ride all night long. But you have to consider that if you just have something on, clear lens for nighttime maybe, or an amber lens maybe, or a photochromatic lens. That way you still have eye protection during the nighttime hours. You're riding with other folks, rocks are getting kicked up, truck passes by, kicks up a bunch of dust. So you got to think about eye protection as well. All right. I did see people wearing jackets at the beginning, and then, what are you going to do? You got to take that off and then carry it and stow it. I just, wool's your friend, by the way, for a lot of these endurance events. Let's talk about nutrition. My 38-ounce bottles, I had 1,200 calories in each bottle, so that's 2,400 calories. It was 6 scoops of Spiz, 6 scoops of Tailwind. That also has a very good component of sodium and potassium. Then I had my little sandwiches, videos you've seen on this channel. Had a complete, just a carb source that was not a complete fuel. Then I had some gels. I had an element because I started cramping, unfortunately, at around mile 60 something to mile 120 something. I was having some really bad cramps, and it was cool. The weather was nice. I don't know why it was happening. And I was really, really suffering for about 60 plus miles. And I don't have an answer. I don't know what it was. So on the return, we were able to get a couple of more miles per hour with a little bit of tailwind, and I started to recover. And these things have happened to me for so many years. I know, and I used to tell people this. The problem or the challenge of a 200 miler, in this case 250, but I would, on the double century side, this is the advice, the mentoring. The challenge of a 200 miler is, it's 200 miles. It's a long time on the bike. The beauty of a 200 miler is that it's 200 miles. And here's what I mean by that. You are going to go through ups and downs, some lulls and some peaks and some troughs. And the beautiful thing about a 200 miler is you're going to come out of it. So if you have a lull, you normally will come back up. It's either more nutrition, more hydration, slower pace, tailwinds, something will turn things around for you. The longer the event goes, the better it is, because you have an opportunity to recover from that lull. So a 100 miler, maybe you'll get out there and you pop, you bonk or something, and there's just not enough time to recover, and you're already finishing, right? Whereas a 200 miler, 250, 375, these kinds of things, yeah, you'll have your rough patches, but you will come back. You will come back. And that's the most important advice I guess I could give someone who's starting out endurance events is, a lot of times folks think, wow, if I feel this bad now and I'm only at mile 125, how am I going to feel at mile 250? But you can't think that way. A lot of times what happens is at mile 125, you may be feeling the worst you've ever felt. But if you give it a little bit of time, maybe you threw down too many calories, maybe not enough calories, maybe not enough hydration, maybe too much hydration, you're bloated. Give it time. These brevets have very generous time limits. We had 27 hours to complete this. So give it time. The most important advice I can give to you is, what you feel now is not what you're going to feel later. And that's a double-edged sword, right? You could be feeling fantastic now and you're not going to feel fantastic later. But If you feel terrible now, guess what? You're not going to feel that way another 2, 3, 4 hours from now, another 100 miles later. You will come back. Just stick with the process of eating and drinking. Maybe slow down your pace so you can digest. You will come back. Most people DNF because they don't know that. They don't feel that in their heart. I feel terrible now at mile 130 and I still got 120 miles to go. I'm going to feel even worse. No, it is not a downward spiral. It isn't. You will come back. Okay. These are the nuggets that I want people to watch my full video, because these are the things that come to mind when I'm talking to you. All right. So what it comes down to is I had 4,000 calories with me. Oh, by the way, I had a Coke and a Monster Peach just for pleasure and enjoyment at 2 different stops. 4,000 calories with me, divided by 16 hours, that's 250 calories per hour. It was like right on target of what I wanted to do, and that's why I felt so good. Now, another thing, early on in the day, like I said, I was suffering for about 60 plus miles, from like 60 something to like 120 something. And, you know, everyone was up the road and they were climbing faster than me, and I just couldn't. And I have a left leg issue, and it was hurting, and I couldn't produce any power with my left leg. It sucked. But I also told my crew, I said, you know what? This ride doesn't even start till mile 200. That's when this ride really starts. And of course, prophetic or not, that's when people started really suffering, right? Brooks said his brain was dead, so he had to take some gels and get his, you know, the glucose levels up in his brain. And, you know, Barbara has a tricep issue that, you know, her body starts to list, nautical term, listing to starboard. And Lori was also having some issues, and also some electronic issues, which I'll talk more about. So fueling strategy, I'm heavier on the nutrition at the beginning part, you know, like protein and heavier fuels. And then as the event wears on, and especially like the last 2 hours, that's just carbs, right? And that, of course, feeds my brain nicely, and it keeps my intensity high to pull to the finish. And I led a lot of the last part of it because I did remember from our pre-ride in the daytime what these areas would look like at night. So I pretty much led on the way back in the last like 10, 15 miles or something like that. Yeah, and let's hope you're not getting sleepy, by the way. I only had about 3 hours of sleep before this event, and so by the time I finished, showered, got home, did everything, whatever, I mean, I was nearly up 24 hours. So that really hurt my recovery, which I haven't talked about yet. I mean, I haven't made notes about yet, but just basically Sunday was a very hard day for me because I hadn't slept much. And then Monday, my legs were really achy and sore. All right, so let's talk about the things that were good. My bike setup was perfect. And I was really worried about it because on my Ritchie Road Logic, I had cut the steer tube a few years back. I had stopped doing these endurance events, you know, these unsupported, longer and longer events. And I had been racing different bikes at my 500 milers. I never intended my Ritchie to be more than maybe 150, 200 miles, maybe. And now I'm doing 250 and thinking about doing the 375 on it. So the bars are probably a little lower than most people would see on someone's endurance bike relative to their body proportions, their saddle height, whatever. But I was so happy that my bike fit was good. My palms didn't hurt. I didn't have hand numbness. My shoulders, nothing hurt. I was just nice and comfortable. You know, you get the pressure of sitting on a saddle for 16 hours, but I mean, everything was fine, and I was grateful for that because I did worry. This is the longest unsupported ride I've done in a very, very long time. I used to do brevets many, many years ago, a decade ago, and I had stopped. But, you know, I'm mentoring some new folks now, and it feels good, right, to take them along and get them to their new PRs. This was Barbara's new PR. This was Lori's new PR. We've done tandem 500-mile races, but this is the first time she's been on her solo bike for that long. So all good stuff. So my nutrition was perfect. I was never nauseous. My stomach was perfect all day. I have gladly become a flux capacitor. I can eat and drink just about anything these days on my bike, which is awesome. So I had no burping, no gas. You know, the 2 bottles set up where I had different things in each bottle, perfect. Hunger a few times, but you know, you just drink a little bit or have a little sandwich, and that went away. Yeah, just a few swigs of the heavy concentrated fuel, or like I said, little sandwich, which I just love these little sandwiches. They're cream cheese with either jelly or ham, and cream cheese on Hawaiian rolls, really small. If I crest, I take off my, I take off the wrapper, pop the thing in my mouth. It's a little bit hard to get it all in one shot, but pretty much chew a little bit, take a swig, moisten it up, and I mean, I'm 30 seconds into a descent and I'm done with the inconvenience part of it. And that's, you know, when you first start gaining some speed, you're not up to, you know, 40, 50 miles per hour yet. You're just going 10, 15, 20 miles per hour. And then by that time, boom, I've already got it in my mouth and I'm chewing it on the way down. All right. So nutrition was perfect. You can bring baggies. You can do whatever you want for powders and stuff and just get water, which is pretty much what I did. Pause time was excellent. An hour, 29 minutes for 250 miles, a 16-hour, 41-minute thing. When you consider all the lights that we had on the front end and the back end, when you consider, you know, the individual stops, or the stops not including the controls, you got to go into a store, you got to buy stuff. It's middle of the day on Saturday. There's a lineup, there's people, and an hour 29 pause time. So that includes traffic lights, that includes all that stuff. And it also includes some of the bad, which I'm going to get into here. So that's some of the good. Now some of the bad. Electronics. There's a huge learning curve on these electronics right now. I haven't been doing these 200 plus mile rides. So I'm stretching the capacity, organic battery capacity of these electronics. Phone, Wahoo, headlights, right? So, I had a battery pack. That was good. But I had a Wahoo dedicated cable for my Wahoo. Lori forgot hers. So mine was a micro. Hers was USB-C. So yeah, that was a challenge. And so luckily Brooke was with us and he had a USB-C cord for her. She had a battery pack, so that was good. She just didn't have that cord. And I went to give her mine, but it was not compatible. I had brought what I thought was all the cables I needed. And in fact, I did. I mean, my Wahoo, God, my Wahoo, I don't understand. It's supposed to have like a 16-hour battery life. We were 1641, and I still had 25% left. and I turned it on here at the shop and let it sit for another couple of hours, and it only dropped like another 3 or 4%. So, but here's the thing. I'm considering like maybe a 1040 solar Garmin unit, because if I don't have to worry about my computer, then that power brick can be smaller or non-existent, because my taillight's fine, my headlight, I just sort that out, and then maybe I don't even need to take a battery pack. But it would be a smart thing and safe thing to do. Bring a battery pack anyway, right? But the battery life and the solar recharging, especially here in Southern California, we have sunny skies like pretty much all summer long. So I should be able to be gaining a lot of time riding out 75 plus lux, I guess they call it. The thing about the Wahoo, the way it's mounted to the handlebar, there was just no space to put the cord in. So then you had to take the Wahoo off and the battery and put it into your back pocket. So Lori's Wahoo died, Barbara's Wahoo died. I think Brooke was on a Garmin Solar, I think, because he had plenty of battery life. And luckily I still had mine. So we were navigating just off of our two computers, because the other two ladies didn't have navigation, didn't have, whatever. Didn't have a cycling computer anymore. And the thing is, cycling computers just aren't made for people like us. It's a very, 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 very niche market, this small segment of the marketplace that needs computers to last over 24 hours and then some, right? So I've been crew supported for a lot of my 500 milers, and, you pause for a little while, you stop, you're eating, drinking something, changing clothing, you plug into the battery source, or you just have, the headlights from the crew vehicle in front of you, so you don't have to have your headlight on a bright setting. You can have it at a much lower setting to see the road in front of you. My exposure headlight, I was disappointed about this, because it was in the 10-hour program mode, and I think I barely got 5-6 hours out of it. So, I recommend you pull out your headlights and let them, fully charge them, but then let them run and see how much burn time you actually get, so you can plan for that. And whether that means you take a spare, or you run a battery pack, and then you run one while the other one's charging, and so on and so forth. That way you have two headlights in state of play. Now, I didn't bring my other headlight. I had it in the video, and I was like, well, we're not going to be out all night. We're not even going to use 10 hours of battery on this event. In fact, it was like 4 hours and some change. But yeah, the battery the headlight was kind of, flickering, which is it telling you, hey, I'm running out of juice. Again, on the bad, so I've taken these lace-ups, and I've done a convenience factor of having, these stretchy no-tie laces, because, some people complain about lace-ups. Oh, well, the laces, they're all over the place, and they can get caught in your chain rings, and I've never had that happen, but I guess this is what some people think. But these, this kind of modernizes the lace-up situation. So I still get all the benefits of a lace-up, and then I have this no-tie system. However, I cut it just a little bit too short. And probably that much, because it was just a little bit tight towards, the latter part of the event, so way past 200 miles. But then again, how often do people need to ride 200 miles? All right. Now, we had one gentleman, Brooke, who has I don't know if it's Force or if it's Red, but either way, it's an ETAP system. So you get the two coin cell batteries, the 2032s in the shifters, and then you have the two batteries on each one of the derailleurs. About mile 35 or so, and we're off the front, and I'm like, hey, get to the top of that. Well, anyway, he's having some shifting issues, his left shifter. And I'm like, well, get up to the top of that hill at your pace, start swapping out the battery. And, when we get there, we'll sort out what we're going to do. Well, his left shifter battery, the coin cell, was the one that needed to get replaced. I thought it was just a derailleur battery that he was just going to snap in and snap out, done. Or snap out, snap in. But he had to change the coin cell battery. And, I gave him bad advice. I told him, oh, no, it goes in this way, which, I hardly do any ETAP stuff here. I'm a Shimano guy. And at that point, we're stopped at the top of this hill, descending about 5 miles from the control. And I'm like, I look at Lori and I'm like, this is why I just don't ride electronics. I ride Dura-Ace cables, a Dura-Ace mechanical drivetrain with cables. It just makes more sense to me for ultra distance stuff. And if I need to carry a spare cable, I'll bring a spare shifter cable and a spare brake cable. Those things never snap, by the way. So maybe a derailleur cable. But if you've replaced those before you've gone out on something really long, you've done all the training, so that puts wear and tear on stuff, and then you just replace it just before. You should be fine. But some folks asked, oh, well, what was going on with that bike? Did you have a picture on your Strava? And that's what happened. But, those were the things that were good. Those are the things that were bad. And the things that I need to learn more about, because I haven't done these unsupported things in a long time. And years ago when I was doing these, GPS computers weren't all that. I really don't remember. Yeah, this was like 2003, 2004, 2005. And then I took a little hiatus and came back a few more times. But I think it's been about 8 to 10 years since the last time I did these unsupported events. And now the GPS computers, you're downloading the route, it gives you all your cues. So of course, now this becomes way more important. Before, I think people just use like a cat eye, very simple computer that you didn't even think about battery life. Anyway, I wish to open it up to Q&A. So if you folks have some stuff that you wish to ask me about, just drop comments down below. We can get a discussion going. I understand that my recaps are long, but hey, I wish to get as much information out to you folks as possible. Learn from my mistakes so that your events are not eventful. Okay, thank you so much for your time and your attention. Please like and subscribe. We'll see you up the road.